All right, you guys. Hello, hello, hello. Today, as promised, we are going to go over Leadership Isolation Syndrome Part 2. How do you know that you have a problem? Okay, and so if you missed it on Tuesday, I came on and I shared a little bit about, I said, hey, do you guys know about a thing called Leadership Isolation Syndrome? And here's what it is. Here's kind of what it looks like. And you guys, I was inundated by private messages from people just like you explaining to me how or what their leadership isolation syndrome looks like. And so I need you to know that I received messages from people in ministry. I received messages from people in nonprofit work or social justice kind of work. I received messages from nurses, from stay-at-home mothers, from working mothers, from teachers, from, all these kinds of people across the spectrum, people in corporate jobs, people I'm just trying to get myself fixed up over here. People in corporate jobs, people in from different levels of management. And this is kind of the consensus was the same across the occupation, across the occupation spectrum. And that is that, hey, you're right. I'm noticing that the more my sphere of influence grows, or the more, because that's essentially what leadership is, right? The more my sphere of influence grows, so do my feelings of isolation and loneliness. And that really is, in a nutshell, what leadership isolation syndrome is. And so I had, like I said, a ton of messages, which made me go, oh my gosh, we need to speak about this. We need to give this thing, this phenomenon, a name. And we need to figure out how we are going to guard against it. And so if you're here, if what I just described as leadership isolation syndrome, if that's something that you resonate with, why don't you just put something in the comments, tap on those heart buttons, let us know that you are in the same boat as basically, well, not all the rest of us, but that you know what I'm talking about, that you have experience. And what we're going to do today, I'm going to share with you guys how you know you're in trouble. Okay? And so what I did want to say is that this is really a really typical experience. It's very normal. It's not healthy. It's not healthy, but it is common. And so it's helpful to just say, okay, so this is a typical pitfall that a lot of people whose influence continues to grow experience. I don't want to continue to go down this path. And so I'm going to take some precautions. And not tomorrow, sorry, it's Friday today. On Monday, I will do part 3 of this kind of mini series, I guess, talking about ways that you can preemptively come against or combat or undermine, maybe, leadership isolation syndrome. It doesn't have to be a fact of existence. And so one of the worst lies that was ever told to me was that leadership isolation syndrome was inevitable. So I do want to make the distinction and say, yes, normal or common. No, not healthy at all. And also, no, this does not have to be inevitable. It does not have to be inevitable. I get to make that choice. And so before we get into how do you know you have a problem with this and what does it look like when leadership isolation becomes problematic, before we get into that, I just wanted to tell you guys really quickly about my Get Stuck, Stay Unstuck group coaching program. Literally your isolation syndrome solution, literally. If you watched the video that I did on Tuesday, you know that a huge part of my why is this exact thing. And the reason why I do group coaching for women who are in whose sphere of influence is growing in whatever sector of the world it is not on my watch are we going to feel isolated and alone and in trouble because of this. And so if you want to hear more about Get Unstuck, Stay Unstuck group coaching, which is a group coaching service that I offer. I would invite you to hit the link in the description of this video, and I'd love for you to take a look at it. Something else that I think is a really powerful tool, and that's something that I just want to remind you about, is the Mompreneur Mentorship Program. Cohort 1 started this week. We have had some of the best conversations. The material that is just amazing. We have the most incredible guest mentors, all the things. And basically, if part of your leadership isolation syndrome, if part of that looks like for you, feelings like, I don't feel like I'm enough for this. I don't think I have what it takes to get through the season of my life, or I don't think I have what it takes to be the person I feel like I'm called to be, then really that is the goal of this mentorship program, to help you see that you are enough, and not just to help you see it, but help you to believe it and to live it, right? If you know me, you know that I'm all about, let's dig deep, let's get to the root of the stuff, but then I'm also about, okay, so what are we going to do about it? And so that's what that's about. If you'd like more information, please just hop into the comments and say, hey, I'd like more information. Okay, but without any further ado, let's go on to talk about what leadership isolation looks like and how to know that you're in trouble. And so what I've seen from just my own life and an experience of the lives of the people that I get to rub up against, that sounded weird, but it typically starts out like this, phase 1, and then it slowly degenerates into a really, really bad emotional space. And the reason why this is so dangerous is because you, as a human being, were designed to need human connection with other human beings, not just yourself. And so my theory, at least, is that what our culture has done is that in having people assume leadership positions, and having people grow their sphere of influence, or the degree to which other people start to depend on and look up to them, is that we start to strip those people, we start to strip our leaders of their humanity, at least in our own perceptions. And so when we look at other leaders, our margin for error, or our tolerance for error or mistakes or failure in the lives of our leaders, is so tiny. And then we start apply those same judgments that we have and those same requirements we have of other people, as soon as, which are unhealthy and unhelpful, by the way. We stop seeing our leaders as human. And so when we start to gravitate into positions of influence and leadership of other people, those same frameworks for leadership, those same assumptions we have about leadership, those same belief systems we have about leadership start to apply to us as well. And so the extent to which your culture, and then you together with your culture, dehumanize leaders is probably going to be the extent to which you feel dehumanized as a leader or as a person who has influence in the lives of other people. And being dehumanized is very serious. And so if we live in a culture, and if we cooperate or corroborate with that culture in our expectations that our leaders are more machine than human being, then we're going to lay that same expectation of ourselves and find ourselves to be becoming more, or expected to become more machine, less human being. That we're going to be expected to lay our human needs, our human frailties at the door, to ignore them, to pretend that that's not there. And the more that we do that, the more we hurt ourselves and the people around us in the process. And then this is the irony of leadership isolation syndrome, is that in order to be a healthy leader, in order for your followers and the people in your sphere of influence to be influenced by you, you need to be a healthy leader. And in order to be a healthy leader, you need to be a healthy human. And leadership isolation syndrome is a threat to your health as a human being, your emotional health, and even your physical health as a human being as well. And so the first kind of phase in leadership isolation syndrome, or the first, this is one of the first things you need to start taking note of, is if you start to feel feelings of isolation and loneliness. And what's very characteristic of that kind of phase in leadership isolation syndrome are stories like, well, no one understands what I'm going through. No one understands me. I can't talk to so-and-so about this. I mean, fill in the blank, anyone's name, because they don't understand what it's like to be me. And so we start to get this, we start to make up this story that no one can possibly empathize with our humanness because we're in a different category of human because we are in leadership or because we're in a sphere of influence that's different to someone else's. And so the first real sign that you need to take note of is feeling like no one understands and feeling hesitancy to talk to people about what you're going through, anyone, because you're like, well, I'm lonely, I'm feeling isolation, and the reason is because no one understands what I'm going through and I don't have anyone that I can talk to. The next kind of phase of this process, or what this slowly starts to become, and really might be the reason all of this is happening to begin with, is you start to feel like you don't have permission to receive support from other people. And so what usually accompanies those kinds of stories that we make, or those kinds of assumptions, are feelings of failure and shame. And so if you remember what I said earlier in this live, you can go back and watch the replay, is that what's actually happening is that we as a society expect superhuman or almost machine-like performance. We expect a dehumanized performance from our leaders. And so we expect dehumanized machine-like performance, or read into that, a perfect performance from ourselves. And when we don't live up to those expectations, and we don't because we're not machines, and because we are not perfect, it's impossible to be perfect, we feel intense feelings of shame and failure. And so for a lot of it, we feel like, well, I can't confess my failure. I can't confess my shame. I can't confess or talk about the ways in which I am human just like the rest of them, because that implies, according to my culture standards anyway, that I'm a failure as a leader, which is not true, right? I mean, like, we're people. And so one of the overwhelming feedback I got on the live that I did on Tuesday was, I feel like I may not be tired. I feel like I may not get sick. I feel like I may not feel frustrated. I feel like I may not know what not to do. Like, I feel like I don't have permission to need more answers. I feel like I don't have permission to say, I don't know. I feel like I don't have permission to say, I'm not sure about how to do that. I feel like I don't have permission to not know everything. And so it's just mind-boggling to me that we look up to people because they are credible in certain areas, or we recognize that they are worth listening to in certain areas, but then we go and we expect them to be experts on everything. And we create a position, we create a space in which leaders or people of influence, even ourselves, if we're in those positions, we feel like we don't have permission to go, I don't know. And there is a real sense of fear surrounding things like, being able to say things like, I can't do that. That's not in my wheelhouse. I don't know how to do that. Or I don't know what to do, or I'm struggling with this other unrelated thing, but still part of my humanity. Like, we've created spaces where it's not safe for leaders to say or express or be honest and authentic about what their true lived human experience is, because they're afraid that they will be demoted, or that they're afraid that they will be, get fired in some cases, where they're afraid that they will lose clients because they're human and they don't have permission to receive support from other people, because what is implied when you're in leadership or in influence is that you need to have your ish together. And if you don't, then you don't deserve to be here, and we will, in many ways, take your calling away from you. It's awful. The last thing is you start to feel, and this is you're in big trouble if this is where you're at. It's a symptom of leadership isolation syndrome. So when you start to feel angry, resentful, and judgmental of other people's neediness, is what I wrote over here. But this can be true if you start to feel angry, resentful, and judgmental of other people's humanity. And so I've seen this play out so many times in leadership, where a leader, a more senior person of influence or leadership, does not feel like they have permission to be human. And so they withhold permission to be human from every single person on their team. They feel like it's not safe for them to make mistakes, that mistake making is threatening to them. And so they make it threatening for everyone else. And so it almost becomes like, well, if I'm going to suffer, then all of you are going to suffer with me. And it's almost like a perception or a self-judgment thing that we do as human beings. We go, well, I don't feel safe doing this. I don't feel safe being human. I feel like I have to be a machine in order to be respected or in order to maintain this position of influence. All of you have to be machines with me. And really, so like it goes from, I feel like I don't have permission to feel like I don't have permission to receive support, to no one is allowed to receive support. If I can't have it, none of you can have it. If I can't have humanity, no one can have humanity. If I have to be a machine, we all have to be a machine together. And then it starts to, particularly in the helping professions, and this is really my context, most of my context comes from the helping professions and ministry, social work, and other nonprofits, is that we start to become resentful on the people that we were once extremely passionate about, because they represent to us needs that we can never have, at least we tell ourselves we can never meet, that can't be met anymore. And we feel resentful about having to be there for other people when we don't have anyone to be there for us. And I think that one of the reasons why this happens is because by the time you're feeling resentful, and this is due to just understanding how boundaries work, when you're feeling resentful, it's because you're being asked to give something that you don't have to give, or you are not in a position to give. And so when you're starting to feel resentful of the people that you're supporting, you're starting to feel resentful of your clients, when you're starting to resentful of the people that you once loved serving, it's probably because you are serving them from a place of emptiness, and from a place of real scarcity in you. Remember, like, you're a human. The people that you're serving can only really be healthy and helped healthily if you are healthy and if you're receiving help healthily. Like, that's just how it works. And you can only be helped healthily if you're prepared to acknowledge that you need it, and then to give yourself permission to receive it. And so when you stop giving yourself access to the help that you need, when you stop giving yourself permission to receive support from the people around you, when you cut yourself off from your innate human need for human connection, you become less and less able, as well as less and less willing to help people. And your resentment towards them is probably your body, your brain firing off a flare gun saying you need help, you need help, you need help, you need help, you need help. Resentment is really like, if emotions are messengers with messages that we need to see and hear, resentment may very well be a sign that your needs are not being met and that you need to meet them before all hell breaks loose, I guess. Before Chernobyl is like something I like to call what happens to me when I lose it. Anyway, so I hope that was really helpful. If that was helpful, why don't you pop into the comments what was most helpful to you? What made you go, oh snap, okay, I can see dots connecting. Is there anything in what I shared that made you go, okay, this is my experience? And you guys, let's bear witness to one another. Let's bear witness to the ways in which our culture, as much as it tries to take care of us, actually hurts us sometimes. Because the only way we can make a difference in this, and the only way that things like this can change, is if we collectively redefine what we want as our ideal for leadership. And I think it starts with us going, yeah, it hurts me. And I can tell you from all the messages that I received on Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday, this hurts a lot of people. And so I think a lot of us need to hear from other people that most of us are struggling with this. And if most of us are struggling with this, and that means that not only do we need to adjust how we handle leadership and influence, but our society needs to adjust its expectations of leaders as well. Monday, I'll be back at more or less the same time, and we will be sharing about what we can actually do about this. What can you do to make sure that you don't fall into this trap? What can you do to make sure that the organization that you're working in, the leaders that you are influencing, that they don't fall into this trap? And how can we reimagine what leadership looks like in our culture? How can we take responsibility for our culture in this regard? All right, you guys, if you like this, please share it. You never know who it's going to help. You never know the lives that it could impact. If it impacted you, it could probably impact someone else. Please join the conversation in the comments. Start a conversation in the comments. And yeah, reach out if you want to hang out. I love you lots and have a great weekend. Bye, everyone.